Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and I'm taking care of business. Joining me today is Franco Terrazzano, who is Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thanks, Franco, for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
All right, federal budget time coming up. Let's start this conversation, Franco. In a nutshell, what do you want to see out of the federal budget?
Well, we're looking for one really key and important thing. We're looking for a concrete plan to balance the budget and to stop racking up so much debt, which is going to have to be paid back by future generations. So that is going to be the key thing that I am looking for, is an actual concrete plan and a concrete timeline to finally balance the budget.
Let's talk about the debt, and can you give us some context of how bad it is?
Yeah. Well, it's not good, that's for sure. Right now, the federal government is about $1.2 trillion in debt. Mario, as we talked a few weeks ago, we were bringing this debt clock tour all across Canada, huge clock showing the government's debt increasing in real time. So the government is already more than $1 trillion in debt. That debt is increasing by about $4,500 every single second, which means that each Canadian is on the hook for about $31,000 in federal debt. But even when we use numbers from the Parliamentary Budget Officer, the government's own independent watchdog, things don't look good. The PBO data suggests that this government won't balance the budget until 2070 under the status quo. So 5 more decades of deficits. And Mario, if we look at the Trudeau government's track record, I mean, it's not good on balancing the budget. Right? Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, before he became the PM, he said the budget would balance itself. Obviously, that didn't happen. When he was running to be the prime minister, he said he would run a few modest deficits, then balance the books in 2019. That didn't happen. And now it's hard to even get a peep from the Liberal government on when they're going to balance the books.
All right. What kind of things do you think should be done?
Well, what should be done is we need to see this government return to pre-pandemic levels of spending. Because, by the way, even before the pandemic in 2018, the federal government was spending all-time highs, which means the Fed spent more in 2018 before there was a pandemic, before there was a cross-country recession than the Feds did during any single year during World War II. And we crunched the numbers, and it shows that the federal government could actually balance the budget within a few years just by returning spending to pre-pandemic levels, which were already all-time highs.
So where can they, so to speak, cut the fat?
Well, how much time do you have? No, let me give you a few concrete examples. Of course, you have to see leadership start at the top. And that means members of parliament need to reverse the pay raises that they've been giving themselves during the pandemic. But the big savings, of course, are going to come through the bureaucracy, meaning reversing the pay raises that 312,000 federal government employees received during the pandemic, while their neighbors in the private sector struggled with job losses, pay cuts, maybe even lost their business. Then you have to talk about corporate welfare. Between 2017 and 2021, the federal government announced $18 billion worth of corporate welfare announcements. Then you got to look at equalization. I know equalization is a thorny topic in your neck of the woods. Well, we can't just keep increasing this equalization slush fund by $1 billion every single year forever. And let me give you one more important example. It's the Trudeau government's gun ban and buyback. Now, the estimate suggests that this could cost billions of dollars, but the RCMP union says that it's not going to make Canada safer because it's targeting law-abiding citizens, right? Yeah. I don't think there's too many gangsters that are going to show up to government offices to hand in their guns. So those are just a few examples.
Okay, so recently we had the news of the Liberal and NDP Alliance, for lack of a better word or whatever. Does that strike fear in you and in your organization that, you know, what that's going to mean is actually going to be the reverse and we're going to be spending more money?
Very concerned, very concerned. We have to remember that this Liberal government was already spending like crazy even before the pandemic, spent like crazy during the pandemic, using the fog of COVID-19 to go on a debt-fueled spending binge. And then the NDP wants to spend about $200 billion more than the last Liberal budget. It's completely bananas. It's not even in touch with reality. So it's spending that we can't afford. It's spending that will continue to fuel inflation. But not only that, the NDP's platform was chock full of tax hikes, wanted to raise income taxes on top earners, wanted to raise business taxes, wanted to raise capital gains taxes, wanted to put in a wealth tax, wanted to put in a so-called excess profits tax. So the NDP essentially wants to raise every tax under the sun, when what the Liberal government needs to do is rein in the years of overspending. So Mario, the budget already looked bad before that agreement, and we're very, very, very concerned about the added debt that's going to happen after this agreement.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about, Franco, is the carbon tax and the fuel tax and the gas pumps. How much more can consumers take of this?
Well, oh man, I mean, the Canadians that I talk to, it's not much more. People are already feeling squeezed at the pumps, right? And unfortunately, you have Ottawa making the tough times tougher. On Friday, April the 1st, just happened. The carbon tax just went up to 11 cents per liter of gasoline. Not only that, but booze taxes also went up on April 1. And get this, members of parliament gave themselves their third pay raise during the pandemic on April 1. So it might sound like a cruel April Fool's joke, but to me, it feels like a slap in the face. And I'm sure it does to many struggling taxpayers to know that our politicians in Ottawa are now taking more money out of our wallets while they stuff their own pockets with higher pay. That all happened April 1. It was a bad day for taxpayers.
All right, Franco, will be interesting budget day. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, super. That was Franco Terrazzano, who is Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm Mario Toneguzzi. This has been Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.